Evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 13th, 2022 regular meeting of the Policy and Services Committee. Can the clerk call to order?
Chair Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Cormack. Here. Councilmember Tanaka is absent. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we will start with oral communications. Anything that is not on the agenda, public can speak to. Do 3 minutes.
Chair, we do not have any requests to speak.
Okay. Then let's move right into item number 1, a referral from the City Council for Policy and Services Committee Rental Survey Program discussion and recommendations. The staff has a staff report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're going to invite Rebecca Atkinson, a planner with our department, to make the presentation this evening. Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening on the topic of a rental survey program for Palo Alto. I'm Rebecca Atkinson, a planner in the city's long-range planning division. Other long-range planning team members are also here tonight, including our principal planner, Sheldon Ossing, and manager, Claire Campbell. The rental survey program team also includes Minka Vanderswag in Human Services, as well as Jennifer Fine and Albert Yang in the City Attorney's Office, and Melissa McDonough and Chantal Cotton-Gaines in the City Manager's Office. Our goal tonight is to present and discuss with you 6 key considerations for the design and implementation of a rental survey program. These considerations are collection of rental survey program information, program participation, frequency of reporting, rental survey program cost, and program fees, and community outreach and engagement. Can you move the slide forward, please? Thank you. We will use the feedback received tonight to craft a draft ordinance to bring to the Human Relations Commission, the Planning and Transportation Commission, and City Council as part of the next steps ahead. Next slide, please. In this presentation, we'll cover the topics on this slide, background, the aforementioned considerations, and next steps. Ultimately, we look forward to discussion and feedback, as well as a motion. Next slide, please. Regarding background, a series of council colleague memos kicked off significant renter protection policy work in the city, culminating in council action in November 2021 to support the rental protections package listed on this slide. Items identified as referrals to the Policy and Services Committee are shown in purple, which are the rental survey program, the anti-rent gouging topic, and a fair chance ordinance. Next slide, please. Specific for tonight, City Council referred the design and implementation of a rental survey program to the Policy and Services Committee, including proposed fees, resources, and a timeline. Next slide, please. A rental survey program is a tool by which to collect information on rental units from landlords in the city of Palo Alto. We've listed example categories of information on the slide, and these will be elaborated on later in the presentation. Next slide, please. The information collected by the rental survey program would assist the city in learning about the Palo Alto rental landscape as it is experienced by renters and landlords, as well as guide policymaking initiatives that support the certainty, stability, and fairness in the rental market for tenants and landlords. This information would also support implementation of the existing renter protections instituted by the state and the city. Next slide, please. As for the basic components, a rental survey program would involve creation of a guidance and resources website, accompanied by an online portal that collects information about rental units. Jurisdictions typically require landlords to fill in the requested information. Some jurisdictions also offer a tenant portal from which information on their unit could be verified. Some jurisdictions also use the portals for landlords and tenants to access services. Of special note, The draft enabling ordinance would outline the purposes of the rental survey program, the general categories of information collected, administration considerations, such as those rental units participating and the frequency of reporting. The ordinance would include clarifications about cost recovery fees and other topics. Next slide, please. Thank you. We are now moving into the heart of the survey program that staff would like feedback on tonight. Staff discussed 6 design and implementation considerations in the staff report listed as A through F. Staff seeks Policy and Services Committee confirmation via a motion on A, B, and C, which is staff's recommended collection of information, rental units participating in the program, and the frequency of reporting. A draft motion will be presented later in this presentation. We will also present initial approaches to the rental survey program costs, fees, and community outreach and engagement. Staff will return to the committee this fall with more information on these, but this meeting is an opportunity to initiate discussions. Next slide, please. Thank you. As discussed in the staff report on packet page 8, staff recommends that the rental survey program collect the following information. Information describing the rental unit and its characteristics, property owner and property manager contact information, an affidavit verifying the accuracy of information submitted, and the minimum information necessary to demonstrate compliance with state and local requirements, as well as information to develop rental policy. This includes rent information and tenancy information. We have included these examples of recommended information on the slide. This information would yield insights into actual rents and other fees for services charged, tenancy turnover rates, and rental unit characteristics. This information is similarly collected by other jurisdictions with rental survey programs. Next slide, please. Thank you. Regarding the rental units to participate in the program, staff recommends following the existing property registration requirements currently defined in the Palo Alto Municipal Code in Chapter 9.72. These existing requirements specify that all landlords register the rental units, whether they be attached, detached, single-family, or multiple-family residential units. The existing property registration program does not provide for registration exceptions. Next slide, please. To ensure that the rental survey program information is current, rental unit reporting updates are needed at periodic intervals. Staff found that other jurisdictions required reporting annually or when a qualifying reporting event occurs. Some jurisdictions actually require both. Some staff recommends the frequency of reporting outlined in this slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Staff is still in the process of investigating the range of rental survey program costs. However, research shows that initial anticipated costs include creation of the database and functionality, the reporting structure, the website, and the online portal. Other jurisdictions also have ongoing maintenance costs and underscored the importance of staffing for rollout and ongoing implementation. Regarding fees, cost recovery is the recommended approach. The associated fees would be influenced by the number of rental units participating and also any degree to which the city would offset some of the program costs. Staff looks forward to returning with more information to the committee in the fall. Next slide, please. Ahead of this committee meeting, staff conducted initial outreach to stakeholders who participated in earlier renter protection policy work. This included the California Apartment Association, the Palo Alto Renters Association, Silicon Valley at Home, Life Moves, and Project Sentinel, and members of the Palo Alto Mediation Program. Further community outreach and engagement is central to ensure that concerns are considered, including costs and ease of implementation. Staff recognizes that the rental survey program may also be perceived differently by renters, as well as landlords with fewer units versus landlords with a greater number of units. Outreach and engagement will have multiple phases, including during initial design and development, rollout, and ongoing implementation. After receiving committee and community feedback, staff will return to the committee in fall 2022 with additional details of the proposed community outreach and engagement strategy. Next slide, please. Thank you. Regarding the tentative timeline for the rental survey program, we have tonight's committee meeting, followed by a return to the committee in the fall, as mentioned. With this input, staff will then return to the Human Relations Commission and the Planning and Transportation Commission for discussion of the draft ordinance and other materials. Staff will then return to the committee for a recommendation to council. Note that after the city council meetings on the ordinance, staff will release a request for proposals to procure a consultant for the rental survey program design. Additionally, staff anticipates city council consideration of staffing and other program resources in the next fiscal year 2024 budget cycle. The goal is the launch of the rental survey program at the end of 2023. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide. We have presented a lot of information thus far on what staff recommends for the rental survey program, as well as topics that we seek feedback on. Since publication of the committee staff report, staff recognized that there might also be a desire to have a more simplified initial version of the rental survey program. If that is the case, then staff prepared this slide that shows initial collection of slightly less rental unit information and an initial list of fewer qualifying reporting events. Focusing in on a more limited number of qualifying events might make the database a somewhat smaller build, yet still capture information pertinent to understanding the rental landscape. Next slide, please. Thank you. Keeping all the information presented tonight in mind, staff prepared this summary slide. It focuses in on items helpful for moving forward. We have a draft motion for discussion, specifically on collection of information, program participation requirements, and reporting frequency. These items will go into the draft ordinance that we bring forward, as well as assist with cost and fee research and outreach. We've also recapped the additional topics for feedback. And thank you, and we'd be happy to take any questions and look forward to the discussion. Thank you. End of slide.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Let's turn it over then for public comment before we continue with the committee discussion.
Okay, our first speaker is Elizabeth.
Thank you. Liz Gardner, longtime renter in Palo Alto resident, single mom, parent of 2 PAs, USD children. First of all, I just wanted to mention that the debate for the Palo Alto online weekly is going on at exactly the same time, and with such an important topic. It was a missed opportunity that these two were overscheduled because of these city council members or candidates that are running on housing as the #1 issue in Palo Alto. I did want to speak to the number of stakeholders that are involved in this rental survey. I was surprised that there wasn't any individual renters involved, and these groups that are involved, which are Project Sentinel, which is contracted by the city, and Life Moves is contracted by the city, and I think it's Palo Alto Renters Association. I'm not clear on how many members they have or what kind of individual stakeholders they have in this. That was my number 2. 3, I'm really hoping that the rental survey will include some kinds of oversight on the exorbitant amount of, especially during the pandemic, where single moms, people of lower incomes, working low-wage workers have had to endure showing proof of 3 times the amount of income to rent, plus 700 or better credit score, plus 3 months of cash reserve in the bank. And it's just outrageous because especially with this economy, you know, the kind of demands that are made, somebody would have to make up to 125,000 to 170 to rent an 800 square foot Alma apartment. So one of the other details that might be nice is the cost per square foot in some of these rentals. And as well as you did talk about services offered, but raising rents based on things like new fans or new carpets, new linoleum, things that are just wear and tear replacement that has been pushed over to the renter. These costs that like designer paint being advertised, I don't know what that is. More clarification from the landlords of what these cost breakouts are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
Our next speaker is Anil.
Thank you, committee members, council members, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Anil Babar. I'm speaking on behalf of the California Apartment Association, one of the organizations that I appreciate staff reaching out to and soliciting our input on this very important topic. We were very clear when we had our outreach session with staff that rental surveys, rental registries, whatever you want to call them, are very burdensome from not just the owner's point of view, but from also the city's point of view. It's costly to establish for the city, costly to maintain the software, costly to ensure compliance by those that you are trying to solicit the data from. These are also typically funded in other cities by taxing owners, which is particularly unreasonable given the fact that we have gone in over the past 2 years through a pandemic where many owners have gone without rent for many months, if not years. Owners are still and the rents that they are owed are only recoverable from the state for those who earn under 80% AMI. There are many tenants who are not paying rent who earn over that and were not eligible for the state ERAP program. Tenants have no way of exempting, or rather requesting that their landlords exempt their information from these units. So we have privacy issues as well from both the owners and the tenant side. A tenant can't simply tell the owner, I don't want you to report my unit's data, because the owner is legally obliged to, under these programs in other cities, to report all data. And then there's privacy concerns from the owner's point of view. This rent data is very competitive information, and neighboring buildings would love to know what the neighboring rents are for the in-place tenants, given this very tight and competitive rental market. In closing, I would encourage staff, as I've said already, and encourage even the council to do more research on what other cities have done when they undertook discussions around rent registries, namely San Jose. Even though they do have one, their city auditor in one of their audit reports, in what was considered one of their more stronger and higher quality audit reports, recommended not to move forward with the rent registry for compliance reasons, cost reasons, and other concerns. So I would really encourage a deep look at the challenges with having this kind of privacy data, this data being put on a public database, where, whether it's through a public records request or a subpoena, that this data can be divulged to the public. And so in closing, in my 6 seconds, I'm going to really reinforce our opposition to this program.
Thank you, Mr. Barber.
Good evening, council members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Lauren Bigelow, and I am the board president of Palo Alto Renters Association, or PARA for short. We want to emphasize that according to staff's report for the item tonight, there are estimated 27,301 renters in Palo Alto, 4,729 of the 11,423 renter households make less than $75,000 a year. That means an average of 80% of those households are cost burdened. PARA believes that the full implementation of a rent registry or rental survey program that has been on the books for 20 years is the single most important and immediate thing Palo Alto can and should do to support our renters, as we do not currently have the means to track important information like eviction notices, rents, and rent increases. This will help us understand what renters are experiencing in ways that we have been unable to do thus far. We encourage the city to move forward expeditiously so that we can ensure compliance with state law. Staff has done a wonderful job outlining the different pathways and examples we could follow. We do not have to reinvent the wheel, and we look forward to hearing your discussion tonight.
Our next speaker is Marcus.
Hi, I didn't get announced. I'm looking at this and I'm wondering what the purpose of all this conversation is. What are we trying to accomplish here? Are we trying to get it so that landlords won't extract more money from tenants? They're limited by the state of California. Do we think landlords are going to be evil and gouge people? I don't think that's in any landlord's interest. They want to keep tenants and they want to collect rent. I would suggest, if we're going to go forward with this, once we figure out all the costs, that we have an extra line in the rental agreement that says this is the cost to maintain the rental survey. Because as I look at this, there are a lot of costs being inflicted upon the landlord that the city will have, and that the landlord will have individually to kind of fill in all the forms that are being required and that are redundant with that which exists already. I hadn't really prepared anything, but that's all I got. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emily.
Submitted a policy memorandum on rental surveys that was commissioned as part of our multi-year partnership with the city as a community partner in the city-initiated grant for the Partnership for the Bay's Future. We would like to highlight 3 points that we believe are addressed in both in the policy memorandum and in the staff memorandum on this item. The rent registry will be exponentially more valuable if it collects comprehensive data across the rental market. For both landlords and tenants, this will be a new process. It will get easier over time, but it's really important that there will be a robust outreach and education campaign, and that particularly for landlords and manager, this be approached with an eye towards support and collaboration with the expectation that this will both improve adoption and start off on the right foot. Finally, these systems do require upfront investment, but over time, these upfront costs will decrease and the investment will pay off in efficiencies. We noted that the fee levels in San Jose decreased around $50 per year over time as the system became more efficient and participation rates increased. So we also recommend that the rent registry cover as many units as it can. It is critical to include the data of units included in the state law AB 1482 to ensure that state law is being followed. The data required should be at a minimum include rent, number of units, when the unit is turned over, and when an eviction is served. So thank you all for doing this. We're quite excited that we're moving forward on this. The rent registry in November was the top priority from council so that we can create data-driven decisions so that we can protect our Palo Alto renters. So I hope you move forward with this and think through. And that's what the whole Policy and Services Committee is meant to do, to kick some tires and figure out the best way to implement this rent registry. And I appreciate your time on thinking this through and making sure that we have a good and robust rent registry. So thank you.
Our final speaker is Leah.
Hi, council members. My name is Leah Cowan, and I'm here with a group I'm passionate about helping to grow. I have been very vocal about my experiences growing up as a renter in Palo Alto. I have, particularly as a renter who grew up in affordable housing units. I have shared the story of my mother's rent being raised well beyond the state rental cap amount indicated in AB 1482. And the road of finding her somewhere else to live in Palo Alto, former landlord right here. And I've shared, I know you've heard other stories, but I'm here to advocate I'm here to advocate so you don't just take my word for it, because you would have known about my mom's situation. You would have known about these bad actors. You would have known when an entire building hikes up the rent to clean it up if you had the data. And we know that Palo Alto is famous for being the most expensive place in the country to rent. And it's a problem we know we have to do something to fix, and we can't fix what we can't measure. And so I'm here to advocate that the rent registry to be foundational in our steps forward as a city, to help create a city where we have a home for us to be stable in. Yeah, so thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, with that, all our speakers, thank you, speakers. We'll return to the committee for discussion. Let's try to break this up, and maybe we can do a round of questions and then a round of discussion. Maybe we can keep our questions to about 7 minutes apiece. Yes, yeah, we can do a hand raise. Go ahead, Councilmember Cornbett.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, and thanks to staff for all the work, which seems to layer as we more here tonight than there was in the staff report. The staff report makes clear, in one of our public commenters just said that we really need to be clear about what our goals are and desired outcomes. And I think there's a discrepancy between the conversation that we had, that I recall having, about what was the kind of information we wanted and what were the things that we were trying to prevent. And I see it sort of covered two places in the staff report. So one place would be describing that we were really trying to protect people who are cost burdened. And then the other is saying that you want it everywhere. So if we look at the data that's on page 18 and 19, how should we be thinking about whether or not this should apply to everyone, including a single family home, right? That, you can imagine might not be a cost burdened household, and people who are in larger spaces. Because I feel like the report has evolved a bit from what I recall the conversation. And I think this is an important question for us to grapple with tonight.
Great, thank you. I know our staff is queued up to answer these questions, but maybe I'll take that first one. I think that's a fair question, and one that reflects some dialogue that we've had at a staff level as well. My recollection, and I think it's reflected also in the staff report, as you noted, there is an interest in serving, helping inform policy decisions that will address those that are most cost burdened. That was clearly a concern expressed by the council, and I believe is an underpinning sort of goal of this program. But then, we start adding on all these other sort of components, and at some point we can have a really robust and comprehensive survey, which it would be very helpful to inform other policy decisions that may go above and beyond this sort of cost burden group. And the idea of single family homes with an ADU or a JADU, I think is one where we're hoping to get some feedback from the Policy and Services Committee, because while as a planner and people interested in this, we would love to know what those ADUs are being rented for, and which ones might qualify as affordable to help inform our reporting to the state in terms of, in the future, can we assign some of our ADUs to our lower income groups,
Okay.
Versus market rate, which is what we assume now without the data. But we also don't have an inventory of all of the ADUs that are in the city today. We have a pretty good data or records on multifamily buildings that we can find out pretty easily. But there's probably a number of ADUs that we don't know about.
Yeah, but I mean, aren't there a lot more single family homes being rented than there are
Yes.
ADUs? So
Yes.
it seems like a potentially overly broad way to get to
Well, that's
the
true.
data you're looking for.
Yeah, and I was just drawing that as an
Okay.
example. But again, fair question and one that we've debated. Let me ask our team, Sheldon or Rebecca, if they have other insight into that question.
Yeah, thank you. I think just piggybacking on that a little bit, if you look at this segment, the single family, detached and attached, it's a pretty big segment. And those are the ones where the opportunities are to have ADUs. So it's kind of worth breaking those down and seeing what kind of data we can get there.
Well, and I'll clarify.
Yeah.
I'll qualify that. It may be, depending on what our program goals are. Again, what we're trying to accomplish here with this rental survey program.
Okay. But so let's just be really clear, because it's a little subtle in the staff report. Our current program for registry exempts someone who owns a single family home and is renting it out.
Yeah, I think it's duplexes and single family homes. Is that
Okay.
correct?
Okay, but you are, when the staff gently says we suggest not casting a wide net and not having exemptions, you're expressing a belief that we should apply this program to absolutely everything in the city.
So we find that there's value in collecting a little bit more information than maybe just the focused rent burden households,
Yeah.
Of which
Okay.
there are many in the city.
And I see that, but I think we just have to reflect on how we would use that data, and is it going to be worth the effort? And what are there unintended consequences? Would some people, just prefer not to? I don't know. I want to think about that a little bit. I don't know that I'm going to have an answer tonight, because for me, the goal and desired outcome was for council to have a much better idea of the problem we were trying to solve. We did not have the data when we were trying to decide, how big a size of units of a complex should we be
Right.
lowering and extending, eviction relocation assistance to. So, okay.
Yep.
Other questions I have. Fees. So you're asking for feedback on fees, but I didn't see any fees listed. What are the fee ranges for other places?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Sheldon.
No, thank you for the question. Yeah, we didn't provide that because, as we mentioned, and Rebecca mentioned that in her presentation, that we'd be coming back to this committee in the fall, winter with that type of information. The next phase of this is to go out and interview some jurisdictions to get more detailed information, but we need a little more feedback about directing our questions. But the cost and the fees, we don't have that detail yet, other than we're suggesting and recommending that a cost recovery is the way to go.
Okay, and fees are usually per unit? Is that how they're charged other places? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
That's
Okay. I was a little surprised that you recommended event reporting as opposed to annual reporting. So Do we really think people are going to just, every time something happens, remember to pop onto a portal and report something? Or do we think this is more like other businesses where we expect people to report, on a quarterly basis, at a structured time, or maybe every 6 months or a year?
Thank you again. And that's kind of part of the feedback that we're trying to hear is if we get something on data on an annual basis, we may be missing out on some of the other data points and events that happen throughout the year. But it is more reporting, as we heard from one of the public participants this evening, that is more of a potential burden to do that. I don't know, Rebecca, if you've had anything else to add to that.
I'll be really interested to hear the feedback from people who actually are in this business. I can imagine that a structured schedule might be, more beneficial. Might be easier for them to remember. How do other jurisdictions address what I consider kind of legitimate privacy concerns? I can imagine a lot of people are going to want to know the racial makeup of people who are tenants, and ages maybe. And I'm starting to think about how much information people would be willing to provide themselves, how it would be held. What are our thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you. And maybe Ms. Atkinson or maybe Ms. Fine can address that question.
Thank you. I think other jurisdictions take pains to protect information and in the reporting. If you can see the examples in the attachments, information is reported more in aggregate. So a couple jurisdictions report by portions of a city and so forth. And so, in terms of reporting, we would anticipate that we would be aggregating this information, although we would have the information in our database, but it wouldn't be publicly accessible. Our city attorney's office has been looking into how to address privacy, including in regard to public records requests, any recent California legislation on consumer privacy and other privacy matters, and might be able to speak further to this. But jurisdictions do take pains to protect privacy, and it is something that the memo that was provided on the preparation of an ordinance addresses. So you could see more discussion in that attachment too.
Yeah.
If I could,
Yes,
so
please.
I don't know that our baseline data collection includes that, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. But I can imagine instantly people are going to want additional information to find out, I can just see that happening. And, it might be relevant to us from a DEI perspective. I'm not advocating for or against. I'm just trying to think through when we collect this data.
That's right.
Other ways we might want to look at. I know my time is up, but I will, how many people do we think are going to be required to do like the data work? I was looking at like 2C on page 10, just the data cleansing, the reconciliation, especially if we have tenants providing their own information, which I think I'll be interested in. How many people do we think are going to have to do this data work? There are a lot of people on the San Jose page.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's part of the next phase, as I mentioned, to do kind of a deeper dive and interview some of these jurisdictions about those questions.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tanaka, do you have any questions?
I do, but I'm still compiling them.
Okay.
Can you go first?
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, staff, for this massive lift and important work, as well as some of the advocates here tonight and others. This is an important issue. Glad it's before us. Few questions. And I wanted to kind of, real quick follow up on one. What slide was that? Slide 20. Just want to be clear. Staff's recommended motion is not the simplified rental survey program option outlined on slide 20. It's the recommendation on slide 12, correct?
That is correct. We are seeking feedback on that, on the simplified version.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Director Late, I wanted to follow up on your exchange. Sorry, I'm trying to find it in my notes. Wasn't really well organized there. You were talking about the ADU registration. And those ADUs would only be required to be registered if they were being rented out, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And so by doing that, that would provide us some really good information as far as number of ADU units in the city actually being used for housing purposes.
Yeah, we would be able to make some inferences, understanding that it wouldn't be precise. We may have some folks who are unfamiliar with the rules, but yeah, absolutely. X% are rented, X% appear not to be.
Perfect. Because to be clear, right now, all we know is the number of permits that have been issued to build ADUs.
Yes.
And then once those permits are issued and it's complete, it's out there and we really don't know what's happening with those ADUs. They could be a private gym, private office, or being used for housing.
That's right. We have in the past done some informal surveys, again, for RENA purposes, but you're right. We do not know how those units are being used.
Great. Thank you. I think that would be really helpful, this information. I'm curious, why is staff proposed naming the program the rental survey program rather than a rent registry? Because it seems like the conversation's always rent registry. This was kind of the first time I saw it as a rental survey program. Is there any particular reason for that?
Thank you. Yeah, that was one of the questions that we posed in the staff report for the committee, was maybe there's a better name or so, whether a registry or a rental survey. We were thinking maybe there's some sensitivity around like akin to the business registry that the city has. So we're definitely seeking some feedback on that issue.
Okay, and what are we seeing other cities naming it by? So you gave a lot of information. I didn't really collect that.
Rebecca, do you think you can answer that, please? Thank you.
Sure, I think they're named different things, but rent registry is frequent. And, you know, we were trying to create a flexible name, you know, depending on, you know, we proposed a more flexible name. And if there was interest in changing it, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. I mean, I don't have a strong preference. I think rent registry sounds better to me, but I could go either way on that. Does staff's, so want to just be clear. So staff's recommendation is that all units are included in this registry, including single family detached homes that are being rented?
So again, I think this is an area where we're seeking policy direction from Policy and Services. And thank you for asking that question, because it gives me a chance to correct something I said before. Our current program, which we mentioned in the staff report, actually is supposed to include rental, single family homes, ADUs, and so forth, duplexes. I had said before that they didn't, but the current program is intended to do that.
Okay, thank you. And does that apply to someone renting a room in an owner-occupied house?
Great. I'm going to need to ask maybe Ms. Atkinson if she has that information.
That's actually a gray area for me in terms of seeing if that would qualify under the rent registration, because it seems to be unit-based in our existing code. We do have a slide that has the precise language if we want to refer to it.
I can look it up and see if it does.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I guess my only concern here, and I'm curious if staff has observed this anywhere else, or maybe if not, I can ask Ms. Bigelow, who probably would have this information too. Have we seen a chilling effect on people removing their rental properties from the rental market out of concern of privacy issues, or just not wanting to go through the hassle of registering their one bedroom in their house, or even their entire home or ADU?
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was looking up the code section for the other. Rebecca, I'm sorry. If you're following that, can you?
Chair, we may need a restate on that question.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I'm concerned of a chilling effect and wondering, have you observed in any of these communities that do have a rental registry, a chilling effect of people removing from the market, a single bedroom they might be renting, or an ADU, or their own individual house, simply because they don't want to go through the hassle of the rent registry or are concerned of privacy issues?
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't know if we've particularly looked at that issue or heard that issue when we did our initial outreach, but it's something that we can certainly ask going forward.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, because I'd like to see this as inclusive as possible. I would just not want to do a policy that is going to restrict our housing stock. I'm curious, Ms. Bigelow, do you have an answer to that? And if not, we can just wait for staff to do further, right? Okay, thank you. So yeah, if we can get an answer then by the next time that would be helpful. Let's see, in just a few seconds left. One more question. Where in this motion then would we include a motion or recommendation on kind of enforcement mechanisms and penalties for non-compliance? Because in like the 6 areas that staff is wanting to have a discussion and get feedback on, wasn't quite sure where enforcement and penalties would fit in.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I mean, I think we were trying to put together a motion to help guide you, but certainly you can put another section or another motion direction anywhere.
And I think that we've got, in our code, when there's a violation of the municipal code, we have a process in place today that would be our default sort of, fee schedule and notification. We can bring that back to you when we come back, sort of what that will be. There is a question about how aggressive the city is going to be about enforcing this. If we're just collecting data and then using that data in aggregate or whatever to, inform policy decisions, if we're going to use it as an enforcement mechanism to see which landlords are, consistently reporting or not reporting, and then following up on that, that's a much more intensive effort that's going to require more resources. And so we can come back to you with some options on how we would approach that.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because I'm aware that Mountain View, now after having gone into requiring the rent registry, they're still only at like 40% compliance. I think especially if we're going to be asking landlords to update the registry with any particular event. I'm interested in really exploring different options that we may not have done before. I think one area, I'd be curious to get the city attorney's thought on this. It seemed, based on, that was a great legal memo that we got on all the other cities. Curious, it seems related to what some other cities have done. Could we, if a landlord does not update their registry within a certain within a certain time frame, then prohibit the landlord from any rent increases until they do update the registry?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Jen Fine, who's been working on this project, may have an additional comment if she's had a chance to look at that issue.
I haven't researched this particular issue either.
Okay, thank you. Because I did see like one city seemed close to it. One city, I think maybe Berkeley, I have to look back through it, allows tenants to not pay rent while a landlord is out of compliance for not updating the survey. So it seems like it would be similar. I think both could be effective, but just trying to find ways to make sure that is updated. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Those are my questions for now. Councilmember Tanaka.
Great, thank you. So as I looked at the staff report and listened to your presentation, it really, and I think Councilmember Cormack said it well, which is, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And I don't know if staff could clearly articulate, what is the problem that we're trying to solve with this?
So again, I'll just forgive me for this, but I'm going to put this back on the council.
Okay.
Because this was a direction that we received from the city council when we came forward with about a dozen recommendations on renter protection programs. This was identified as its top priority for the reasons that I think we talked about in the beginning about cost burden households principally, but I think again, some value that can be gained if we collected some additional information generally about housing policy. So so I think that's reflected in our recommendation here tonight, where we say, here's your baseline data and, other options that are available. But sorry to
Okay.
reflect that
problem,
back
no
to you,
problem.
but that's,
Yeah, I mean, you guys got a kind of a motion out of the blue, and you guys are doing your best. I get that. Because when I was looking back at the minutes, and when I saw the word rental survey, I thought what you guys meant or what we were talking about. This is what I was thinking was like something we would add to our annual survey. So it'd be a question, something like that. I didn't think that we were going to do something so heavy-handed, where it was. Because I know landlords from other cities, they've had to actually hire people, right, to actually do these surveys, because there is like a really heavy legal requirement and penalties and all the stuff that we just talked about. And at a time when we're really concerned about housing costs and rental costs, forcing landlords to hire additional staff to comply to really rigorous compliance. Which is what you guys are talking about, is compliance here. It's not just filling out, the annual survey. You're talking about a real diligence that someone has to do. It's like a tax return almost, right? And if you don't do it, you get a penalty. And I saw some of the attachments from other cities, and some of those are pretty heavy, right? You're talking about some serious penalties if you get it wrong, and so that means that people are going to have to hire people to comply to all of this, and. I know some people who are building ADUs in their house, and they're doing this because they're trying to help the rental market. They don't necessarily need the money, but I would imagine, just to the chair's question, some of these people who don't really need the money, but they're doing it kind of out of the goodness of the heart to provide more renting stock, aren't going to do this, right? They don't want a penalty. They don't want some sort of mark on their record for something like this. I'm frankly really surprised by something so heavy-handed. I thought when I thought a survey, I thought it really was a survey, not a compliance. And so I think I would move that we do something much more lightweight, like a part of the annual survey. Added one more question to the annual survey, and we do it that way. So when we're serving people on other stuff, we can also ask them, so hey, how's the rental situation for you? And I think at least for me, was what I was thinking about when I heard this. I didn't think it was a compliance program, or a reporting compliance program. It just seems so heavy-handed. And also, I'm concerned. I share the concern of the chair, which is I'm worried that this is going to take rental stock off of the market, and I don't think we want that. And we also don't want to increase the rental prices, right? Because if people have to comply to it, it's going to cost. And largely, landlords are probably going to pass the staff cost along to the rent, and I don't think we want that either, right? We already have very, very expensive rent. So, yes, and I also remember we did the business registry, right? And that also, we also had a lot of challenges with that in terms of just executing it and getting the data, and the data was messy. And every time we looked at it as council, it was also very difficult. So I know it takes a lot of time to do this and to do it right. And that wasn't even like necessarily compelling people. But does staff have any idea of how much it's going to cost to implement such a heavy-handed program that you guys are suggesting tonight?
So again, the report itself acknowledges that there will be some additional expenses to staff the program in whatever version it ultimately is established, and for consultant costs to initially to establish the rental portal and ongoing sort of maintenance and considerations. The enforcement component also, depending on where we land on that, could have some significant cost implications. We do not have dollar amounts for you today because we don't know what the program looks like and what the different options for enforcement are going to be. But there will be some costs that we would need to incur. And then there's the follow-along question of how much of it do we try to recover through the program, through fees that are passed on to the landlord.
But the fees, I don't think we could legally compel the landlord to lose money, right? The landlord will raise fees to what they will have to. And so it's not going to come, I don't think it's necessarily free. I think we'll hit the tenant eventually.
I didn't hear what you said there.
I think it's going to hit the tenants eventually, right?
That's one of the things that we flag in the report as a concern, that a landlord who is experiencing an increased burden for this activity could pass that on to a tenant. I believe we reported that there are some jurisdictions that prohibit that, but then again, enforcing that is a whole other, quandary, really.
Because you've already talked about like 3 or 4 different resources that you guys are going to need to do this program. So, I mean, to me, it's looking like hundreds of thousands of dollars to do something like this. Am I wrong, or is it more like millions?
I'm not prepared to give ballpark estimates, but no, it's not. I mean, I wouldn't go that high. maybe somewhere between. But
well, I know the state of California has looked at this 3 times, and every single time they decided not to do it, not because it's not necessarily worthy, but because it's very heavy-handed, it's very expensive. I mean, last night we dipped into our BSR, Budget Stabilization Reserve, twice to fund programs, right? And I don't think this is necessarily funded either. So this is yet another program that we have to dip into our BSR. So we're spending money we don't necessarily have. So to me, it just seems like it's, and the problem's not really clearly defined in terms of what we're trying to solve. So I don't think it makes sense to move forward on this. I think what we should do, and maybe I'll make a motion, is that we add a question to the annual survey. What do we call it? The annual survey here? We call it the annual
citizens.
Yeah, the citizens. What's it called?
What is that? Citizens or something?
National citizens. There's another word, study, survey.
Okay.
There's some word, participation or something.
Yeah.
Civic, there's some word that's third.
Okay, yeah, that survey. We add another question to there to ask about rent. And that way it's somewhat lightweight. It gives us the data that we want. And versus something so heavy-handed like this, because this is just, I think, way beyond what at least I was thinking when we talked about it on council. I don't think we're talking about like some sort of heavy-handed rental compliance program. So anyways, that's my motion.
Hearing no second, motion fails for lack of a second. Are you done with your questions, Councilmember Tanaka?
I'm actually over time, so sorry.
Sorry?
I'm over time, so I'll go on my next round. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. Okay, then let's move on to another round then, and this time we can open it up for for discussion, motions, additional questions, et cetera. Okay, Councilmember Cormack.
Thank you, Chair Stone. Okay, helpful. Yes, I think the part in the report that I was remembering about single-family homes had to do with mediation. It wasn't about the registry. So collectively, we're going to figure this out. I went back and reread what we said on page 7. And we did absolutely talk about a registry, not a survey. So at the time when we get gifts, whereas survey sounds a little bit more like information. So I'm certainly comfortable with the direction of survey. It's really reflects, I think, our intent, which again, as I recall, was to gather information, as it says right here, for policymaking that supports lower income and cost burden tenants. So I think staff's done a good job here on page 7 of laying out the goals and objectives. I can certainly imagine that the vacancy information, so that in the stripped down version, the vacancy information isn't there. I think that's helpful. And because that gets at, will there be enough space if, rental units go out of the program and people need to move, if there's a change in use, et cetera. I think it would probably also help us understand, demand, right? As we think about, how many more apartments do we need in this community? Understanding the difference between that and condominiums, we'd probably have a better sense of, the demand, and that could hopefully influence, what the council does in terms of supply. So I'm trying to think about, what we're going to do with this data, in addition to the goals and desired outcomes. I guess there's no harm aside from the transactional work that has to be done to include single family homes. So here's a question though. Some of this data is already available online. So like we had a question about, well, this will be information that other, property owners could then get. Well, we've got Zillow, we've got Trulia, we've got, apartments.com. Have we thought at all about using publicly available data as either another source or a double check? I'm just sort of brainstorming here about all the data sources we have.
Yeah, Sheldon or Rebecca, I think those data sources provide some information, but it may not get at the granular level that would, it would certainly help us, understand how rents are changing over time. I don't know, Sheldon or Rebecca.
No, thank you. I think you did get that right. That I think the survey or registry would be more focused information that we get. Sometimes those other information, it's more sample size. It depends on the sample size. So I think as well that we would need some of this data to try to fulfill state requirements, for instance, state laws. So I think those are things that these other Zillow doesn't really address that the way we can through a survey.
Yeah, no, I understand, but oh, sorry, go ahead, Ms. Atkinson.
No, I was just saying that's right. A lot of this information is still aggregated or focused on a certain segment of the rental market. Sometimes this information lags, like even the American Community Survey information. It takes a while for this information to go out. So this is a way of keeping our program as fresh and current and direct and as granular as we can.
Okay. I liked the idea on page 37 that came in the letter about translating information into other languages. I don't know, we often tend to design a comprehensive program when we start things, but I think the idea of starting with something more lightweight is a really good idea because it will help us figure out what is missing. Is there something else we should be asking for or some different way we're doing it? The idea of them providing the landlords being required to provide information certainly seems, appropriate. I was kind of intrigued by the emergency services volunteer thing. I know we always get into like how the city can communicate with people who are renters based on, how the utilities work, right? So do we actually know where everyone is? So I can certainly see some benefits from us having slightly more information there. Okay, so if I look at the motion, I think there's probably something in between the full version and the reduced version and I appreciate staff bringing forward the simplified version that might be helpful. Help me understand the rent range versus rent amount. Why wouldn't we just ask for the rent amount?
Okay, I'm not
About
sure.
that. That was beautiful.
No worries.
Thank you. Yeah, we were discussing that this afternoon, and I think it was just thinking about some of the like one of the public participants said today about burdensome for data. If it is simplified, it is kind of an easier way to quantify, an easier way for data input.
Oh, I see. So they can just check a box. It's between this and this, not let me enter the numbers.
Right.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense.
I think it also gets to sort of, yes, and, to the extent that a tenant's got multiple leases that are out on a building and providing specific information about what one tenant is paying versus what another tenant is paying. These are, to some degree, there's a little bit of negotiation going on here when you enter into a lease. And so that's another sort of privacy concern that I think we would hear from landlords.
Okay. And it seems like the number of bedrooms would be relevant. You could have, I think the square foot would not necessarily match with the number of bedrooms. So, Yeah, I guess I'm leaning towards the full one. I see I'm at time, but let me just whip through this. So did you, so in the draft motion part B, 9.72 existing, can you just summarize those? Or is there some page in the staff report we should be looking at? I felt like they were spread out.
Rebecca, can you please guide us there?
Sure. The participation requirements.
It says part B is utilize the existing property registration participation requirements outlined in PAMC chapter 9.72. And I'm just trying to figure out where those are. A
Sure.
few of them were mentioned in the report, but.
Sure. The property registration information is in section 9.72050, property registration, as well as in definitions, and in that same chapter. And the residential property that requires registration is any housing structure occupied as a dwelling or offered for rent as or lease as a dwelling. So it's basically retaining the definition for the rental survey program that's in Palo Alto Municipal Code, Chapter 9.72, specifically 9.72080.
Okay, so should we be looking at 25, packet page 25, and turn to 26, just so we understand what we would be recommending?
Let me look at packet page 25. Hold on just 1 second.
Just trying to cross-reference here.
Sure. My packet page is in an attachment for page 25.
It's titled Existing Renter Protections at the Local and State Levels. I don't have it by, it's 1C. 1C, do you have that? It's attachment 1C.
Yes. Oh, yes. That is the same section.
Okay, that's the section we should be looking at to map to draft motion part B.
Except for the PMA Palo Alto Municipal Code section 9.72050. That is the registration section.
Okay, so next time this comes back, it'd be super helpful to just have that slightly,
I think what
easier to
B
find.
understood, yeah, it's confusing to
all
track
right.
this.
Okay,
But B is basically saying it would apply to all rental units.
got it.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, over my time, but just trying to work through all the letters here. I'll cede the floor.
Councilman Tanaka, any comments or would you like me to go?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, sounds good. So be clear again, staff is really looking for kind of feedback tonight on collection of rental survey program information, program participation, and frequency of reporting. And then we're going to follow up on D, E, and F at the next meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Okay, so I'll make comments then on those three. Overall, I'm very supportive of the full staff recommendation tonight. I do have actually a couple of additions that I think are appropriate for the type of information that we're trying to collect to make it as useful as possible for us. One, I think under like rental unit characteristics example information, and I'm looking at slide 12. I think we got rental unit size there, rental unit, number of bedrooms, property type. Like, is there anywhere in this that it's collecting like actual affordable housing, BMR units, deed restricted units? And if not, I think that information should be included.
Okay.
We have data on that through Alta Housing, which is our manager. So we could either ask, some of that information here as part of the registry, or we can cross tabulate it somehow.
Yeah, try to I know we would have that information. I want to make it as simple for us to be able to collect that information and not risk anything kind of falling through the cracks there if so.
Yeah, so if a landlord has a deed restricted unit, to report that as this is a deed restricted unit at this income level.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if staff think that would be helpful, I think it should be included. If staff thinks we already have that information and it would be overburdensome, then I don't need it. Staff have thoughts on that?
We for myself, I want to be, I don't know, planners love data, but I need to self-regulate that too, so that we're not creating something that is burdensome or, again, what do we want to do with the data? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? I believe that we can probably get that information at, through another source that we don't, regularly exercise that channel maybe right now, but we could. Having it here would be, simpler, but then you're also, there could be reporting errors and, anyways, I can make an argument for getting the data, but I could also, I have an internal sort of regulator that says, wait a minute, what are we going to use it for? And how much data do we actually need to collect? So I'll say that.
Other jurisdictions also, under the rental information collected, they have a checkbox to say if it's a unit that has a Section 8 voucher or any other kind of rent subsidy. It could be a very simple thing to add just a checkbox. This has some type of rental subsidy or other aspect on that unit. It could be collected under the unit information, or it could be collected under the rent information. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Thanks, Ms. Atkinson. I agree. I think we can create a simple several check options. I don't see it being overly burdened. And I think anytime we don't have to cross-reference and risk that sounds better to me. So, and we know too, right, tenants in below market rate units are far more likely to be targeted for discrimination and abuse and all of that. And so anything that we can offer additional protection, I'm happy for. So I think that should be included in there. So we have tenancy status and tenancy or vacancy commencement date, but no reason for vacancy. I think that's really critical information for us to be able to collect, to be able to see why is it that units are becoming vacant? Is it because the tenant is choosing to move out? Is it because the landlord is choosing to evict them for whatever reason? So I'd like to see some option there for them to be able to indicate why the vacancy was terminated. And if it was terminated by the landlord, maybe a simple have to include an attachment with the vacancy termination notice, something like that, to be able to collect that information. I know that it's not mentioned here, but maybe just some sort of be helpful to have some sort of kind of like reminder, or maybe just a reminder to staff. I mean, I know we already don't ask for immigration status or any of these other type of things, but make sure that we're very sensitive to that, because I don't want to create, again, a chilling effect or anything else that could lead to that information being collected. So those are just some of the things that I think need to be included in the information that we're collecting in addition to the staff recommendation. I like staff's recommendation about a process for landlords to be able to express their concerns and share their experiences. And then also that option for then tenants to be able to view what has been submitted by their landlords and to be able to make objections or kind of point out inaccuracies that they see. I think having the affidavit will be helpful, but being able to have, no one knows better their lease and their situation better than the actual tenant. And so being able to have tenants having that oversight would be helpful. So I'm glad that staff was recommending that.
So, and maybe just to clarify, I don't know if I'll have to take a look at the staff report again. I don't know if staff was recommending it or identifying it as options. I do think if we go beyond these sort of baseline measures, it would be helpful. I don't think there's a 3.0 support for this, but it'd be helpful to know if there's, a majority sort of interest in that, because I do think if we start adding these procedures, it does change the program a little bit for how we're going to engage a consultant on how we build out the portal for the landlord to put in data, for the renter to be able to look at the data, and what do we do with those critiques and those sort of conflicts should they arise.
Well, then I think, that's good feedback, and maybe it's just over time, then we kind of get to that. One thing I wouldn't want to see is us prioritize, let's have a situation where landlords can express concerns and experiences and objections. But once again, tenants, that we're going to keep the balance of power with landlords and not you tenants.
Okay,
so maybe when we do get to that part, have it in conjunction.
That's perfect. Thank you.
I do agree. We won't have a 3-0 on that. And then on program participation, totally in agreement for tonight, all rental units in the registry, with the understanding that staff is going to go forward and research those possible chilling effects that we all spoke about tonight. And then on frequency of reporting, I am definitely in support of the staff recommendation on the initially all rental units by a date certain, and then based on qualifying events. One question I noticed in the motion, the affidavit was being offered to be submitted. Well, the way the staff motion is worded to me, it says, or an annual affidavit if no qualifying events occur. Would we also be requesting an affidavit for any other time that this information is submitted?
I'm sorry, that I think that it would be an affidavit every single time anybody submits everything. But I think the idea was it might be possible, especially to respond to landlord concerns about having to report so frequently. There might be plenty of landlords that aren't doing rent increases or evictions or vacancies or anything, that there might not be any events to report over the course of the year. So in which case they'd be able to submit just an annual affidavit that there's nothing to report. So it was an option to, keep our data fresh, but also, try to be responsive to what is actually happening for tenants and landlords. So to capture, the more frequent information if it was going on, but also, have somewhat of a relief valve if there was only one thing that they had to do a year, which is an annual affidavit. So
I'm fully supportive of draft motion C with the affidavit. I just wanted to verify affidavit would also be required on any other reporting from the landlord. So I'm glad to hear it does include that. And I just a few thoughts. I'm glad she's gone now, but Leah shared kind of one of our public speakers shared her experiences, her stories, and a belief that if we were able to have reporting happening at qualifying events, that could have prevented some of the incidents that she seemed to experience. I also have experienced these issues as well, and I think if we had a rent registry where a qualifying event would have required my landlord notifying the city would have been aware of the mass evictions that were taking place in my apartment complex earlier this year. And, it's fortunate that I witnessed it, and several of my neighbors came up to me and shared their stories, and they contacted other members of the city. But it took so long because it took so many people being kind of told about this over time that by the time the city was able to kind of react to it, so many tenants had been removed, and many of them appearing to be either illegally removed or in a way that they were not able to get some services. And I really appreciate a lot of our renter advocacy groups that have been able to help many of those tenants. But this information would have been able to prevent that abuse early on. The city would have been made aware almost immediately of this. So I think that's why it's so critical to be able to have this information in real time. To be able to prevent that. It would have prevented Leia's problem, could have prevented so many tenants like my own. I mean, a Vietnam veteran in his 80s evicted from his just an incredible guy, and evicted before he had a chance to really be able to raise any problem. And he is not alone. There were several, and I know that continues to happen around the city. So I really have no problem requiring landlords to continue to have to update the portal after any significant event. I mean, if they're evicting a tenant, or if a tenant chooses to leave on their own, I mean, there's so much that goes into then the landlord having to re-rent that property. They got to repaint it. They got to remarket it. They got to do deep cleaning. They got to do all these steps to put somebody in. I think simply updating a rental portal on the city website is a de minimis request of these landlords. So I don't think we should be here concerned about overburdening landlords. I don't see in any reality where a landlord is going to need to hire additional staff to fill out a portal. My view, reading through all these examples, thank you staff for finding that. That was incredibly helpful. I could have gotten through that in 5 to 10 minutes on a first try, and landlords being able to, landlords after doing that several times, they're going to be able to fly through this information. So I don't think this is overly burdensome. Yes, we need to make sure that it is user-friendly, and I think Palo Alto does a pretty good job at that to make sure that it's as easy as possible for landlords to navigate this. I think Councilmember Tanaka made a good point for individual homeowners. We really want to make sure we provide them support, and so maybe that's staff holding workshops, maybe once a year or something, or maybe for homeowners, it's not every event. Maybe that is once a year for a single homeowner. I think some creativity can be found there to address some reasonable concerns. But for most landlords in the city, having it being done at any significant event, I think is I'll make the staff motion and incorporate my additions of including affordable housing in the rental units, the reason for the vacancy. And the reason for the vacancy.
So if I can restate what I'm understanding. So the draft motion is to collect the rental unit information as outlined in the staff report and presentation slide 12, utilize the existing property registration participation requirements as outlined in Palo Alto Municipal Code, chapter 9.72, which is all units we would include in the program. And letter C, utilize the initial rental unit registration and thereafter use qualifying event-based reporting frequency or an annual affidavit if no qualifying event. And all of them, of course, would be with an affidavit as we had discussed. And then referring to some of the comments, Chair, that you had made.
Go under A.
Would go under A as the types of characteristics that we would also want to collect in that. And we all have notes on that, including reason for the vacancy, deed restricted units, so on and so forth. So we have those notes, and that's what we understand to be the staff, what the motion is.
Yep, and I'm just wondering if I'm wondering if we need to just make clear and see that the affidavit would also apply to those other reporting, or is this staff clear?
Yeah, I think I said that in my yes, we will. That's what we're understanding is that an affidavit, there'll be, they'll have to sign some affidavit electronically, presumably that says that they attest to the accuracy of the data.
I will second the motion and would like to offer a friendly amendment when the chair is ready.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Yes. What's the amendment?
I wanted to direct staff to offer suggestions about how council policies we might make using the data. And, while we're all I'm looking at packet page 172 and 173. So I think this would, broad enough for staff to work with the other jurisdictions and come back and help us. And the reason I say that is I'm hearing a lot of rhetoric that suggests there are problem actors. And I am not denying that there might be problem actors, but that wasn't actually, I think, the initial intent when council did this. So I just want to be sure that we're capturing all of the the reasons we might do this, which some of them would be to take positive action and not just to punish bad actors. So I'm happy to explain this a little bit more. I'm just looking at like the education that can happen, that's captured on page 172. So just hoping that staff could help us do a better job identifying what we're going to do with this data. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you to the clerk. Yes, that's accepted?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
And have you already spoken to the motion or?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, may I just briefly? Okay, so if I could just, just expand a little bit on this. We don't know what we don't know yet. And I think we really have to move from personal experiences to understanding what is happening more broadly in the community. And I think this is one way that we're going to do this. I think we need to be sensitive to the wide variety of types of landlords in this community, many of whom are residents in this community. So I just want to be sure that we're, approaching this not from an assumption that there are many things that need to be fixed, but just that we want to get, a better sense of what's going on and see what policy actions we might need to take. And so that's the spirit in which I'm approaching this registry.
Thank you. It actually,
Survey.
quick question on D there, just as far as for next step. So does staff interpret that to mean staff comes back at the next Policy and Services Committee meeting, or would this be the one in the spring with these suggestions?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of an iterative process that we've laid out. So I think we'll introduce some ideas in the next time we come back to you in a couple months, and then we may refine that further. I think it's really interesting to think about, for each of the data pieces that we collect, how might we use it, options to use it, or how we intend to use it. So I think that's a good exercise for us to go through, because we may decide, oh, that's interesting, we didn't think about that, and maybe that's good, or maybe that's going further than we need to go. So I think that'd be a helpful exercise for us to go through and see what other jurisdictions are also doing with the data.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting and helpful for everybody. It'd just be concerning if we did it as binding on the council, but as far as this kind of exploratory makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Great. Councilmember Tanaka?
Yeah, so just trying to understand this. So does this motion mean that it applies to every single property in Palo Alto? So like, let's
rental. Property that is being used for rental. So a home, single family home.
So someone who's renting out a room would have to do this as well.
So I don't, I'm not recall, we had that exchange, but I'm not recalling how we landed on the room rental. I think we said that that's not captured presently.
Well, I'm just trying to send the motion on the.
No, I understand, but
Staff said it was a gray area at this point.
Okay. The reason I'm referring to the current code is because that is a reference to our existing procedure.
Ms. Fine, do you have a thought on that under our current ordinance?
No, not about whether a single room rental would fall under this definition.
Certainly, it's the case that whatever council wants that policy to be, we could draft that clearly into the new rule. We could draft it to include that, or we could draft it to exclude that. It's a policy question for council.
Okay, well, I mean, it's hard for me to know because staff hasn't said whether it's going to be encompassing for everyone or not, but I think this kind of goes to the heart of the matter, and it's something which staff has threw back at me when I asked the question: is what is the mission? What are we trying to accomplish? And I know we have part D here, which is for them to tell us what the mission is, but it's almost like we're all like kind of going on in circles here. So I feel like almost we should be telling staff this is what we're trying to do. And then they can tell us what data we need for that. But what we're doing now is we're saying, well, let's get this data, and then you figure out some reasons why we need the data. And it just seems like what we should do as a committee here is come up with, what is the problem that we want to solve? Clearly tell staff, right? And the majority, so maybe, I'm outvoted or whatever, but clearly tell staff, this is the mission that we're trying to solve. Staff can look at that mission and go, oh, to do that mission, we need X, Y, and Z. And then they could go about getting X, Y, and Z. But instead, what we've done here is said, get X, Y, and Z, and then go find out the mission that we need to justify X, Y, and Z. And it's like, why are we doing that? I don't know. I just think that we should figure out D ourselves and be clear with staff as to what, and because I can imagine from the staff's perspective, it's not clear as to why. I mean, they could guess, but I think it'd be better if we were clear on it. And then, I know that there's been comments about like there's a few bad actors, and I'm sure there are. But there's organizations like Project Sentinel and others where tenants can complain. There's ombudsman type of programs where people can engage with. And so I don't know whether everyone, if this thing does apply to everyone in Palo Alto, which I think is just incredibly broad. And I think if this does apply to everyone and people find out that applies to everyone, there's going to be a huge outcry because this is like, in my mind, a pretty big overreach for us to demand so much, especially for people who are like casual landlords, right? I just think this is kind of like a killer for people. And I also wonder, like we talked a little bit about this before, but there's websites like CoStar, Zillow, a bunch of others where we could get some of this data. But of course, we're not clear on what the mission is. So I think we need to know what the mission is, figure out what data we need, because there's some public sources of data, maybe some data that we have to procure or get. But I just think we're putting the cart before the horse here. And I think the other reality is that we're coming kind of out of the pandemic, hopefully fully out of the pandemic now. And some landlords actually didn't get rent during this pandemic. Some tenants couldn't pay, and some landlords had to eat it. And so it's also an industry that's been under siege. And that and kind of the big brother nature of this makes it, just to me, makes me really, really concerned about this current direction. In regards to like, to the questions staff asked, which was, let's see, A through F. Yeah, so I think program participation to me, I think I would keep it optional, keep it easy for people. And then I think in terms of frequency reporting, I'd rather just keep it open, right? So people can report as it comes. And in terms of the survey cost, I'd rather try to keep this thing really lightweight, no cost to the landlord, tenant, or the city. So something really lightweight. And especially because I don't think we want to keep dipping into our budget stabilization reserve, because I don't know how we're going to even fund this. Because what it means is we're probably going to take another couple $100,000 out of our budget stabilization reserve to pay for it. And community outreach and engagement. I think if this thing really does apply to every single landlord in the city, even a person who rents out a room one month out of the year, we need to do really big outreach to everyone, so everyone knows that this is coming down the pike, right? And they know what's happening and they could give feedback on it. Because I think that's not what I think people are expecting us to do here. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, then if the clerk can call the roll for the vote.
Councilmember Cormac,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
No.
Councilmember Stone.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 2-1.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Good discussion. Thank you, staff and the public.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
And let's take a 5-minute break before moving on to item number 2. So we'll be back at 8:40. And we are back. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to action item number 2, a discussion and recommendation to the City Council regarding the City Council value statement. This is a follow-up to the City Council referral from February of this year. Do we have a staff report? All right. Councilmember Cormack.
We do not have a staff report. We have an ad hoc report.
Great.
Okay. I want to thank Deputy City Manager Cotton Gaines for working with me. We had 2 productive sessions and brainstormed what we thought would be most effective. And as my colleagues no doubt recall, we this year in January, as we so often do, got a little bit wrapped up in a priority setting about what were priorities and what were sort of enduring values. And so we referred to this committee and then the committee to myself in partnership with Ms. Cotton Gaines to see if we could capture some of those things in a way that would be helpful to us when we're making decisions. So I appreciate the work that Ms. Cotton Gaines did to, reflect all the things. It's a nice short report, so I hope my colleagues had a chance to read it. And what we tried to do was capture positive statements that would help us in terms of our fiscal concerns, our environmental concerns, equity concerns, how we do our work, the community safety and health priorities I know we all share, and then just a little bit more on how we do our work. So 4 and 6 are really more about how we do our work, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 are more enduring values. And so, we offer this as a first step to our colleagues, to my colleagues, to see if this, is consistent with what you were hoping for, if we need to improve it, and if we think this would be helpful to council. Again, just to summarize, my hope is that these would be things that endure across councils, that are consistent with broadly held community values. And that would mean that when we're doing our priority setting, we wouldn't have to say financial, fiscal sustainability or, climate, those sorts of things. We'd really be able to focus on the specific work we need to do in a year. Happy to take questions. And I don't know if there are any members of the public.
Just wanted to add one quick note, if I may. City Manager Shikata also wanted me to note for the committee there is a question of the city organization values. And I know that came up during the last discussion that this committee had on this topic, and that staff is going forward with an effort related to looking at organizational values and working with our workforce on that. So as Councilmember Cormack pointed out, the intention of this item coming as a referral from the City Council is to focus on the City Council values and how you do your work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, before we turn to discussion, let's open it up to public comment.
Chair, we do not have any requests to speak.
Turn for discussion, questions, motions. So maybe we can do it all in one round. You've already given your report. No questions on it? Councilmember Tanaka?
Give me a few minutes here. You can go first.
Okay. Well, I appreciate Councilmember Cormack and Ms. Cotton Gaines working on this. I think it's a really good values statement. I like the area where we're kind of talking about how we do our work. I'm wondering, one of the areas that I've always kind of wrestled with and kind of understanding a proper role when we're on, when we are representing the city, whether it be like the League of Cities conference or other regional organizations, kind of like to figure out when there's like council direction, how do we wrestle with our own personal views compared to maybe what the council has authorized. I wonder, was there any like discussion on maybe including that and kind of how we do our work, or if does that not fit within a value statement and maybe somewhere else? Curious about that.
No, if we discussed this, I think it was very briefly. I think sounds to me that's more policies, procedures, protocols, and all the other P's that are in the handbook. I think that's probably a fruitful area for that. And you could Yeah. I mean, we do have follow through on our commitments. That was again intended to be for the council as a responsibility to, to ourselves to get work done. Yeah, no, I think it's a reasonable question. And I hope the Policy and Services Committee, takes up a pretty thorough review of the handbook, see if we can, address some of the situations that have occurred.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm wondering maybe on 6, maybe there was we follow through on our commitments and believe in open communication with our members and all members of our community, like maybe something there where we
Yeah,
kind of show we do that with each other and with the public.
That's interesting. It was really intended to be around transparency, which was one of the things that had come through. And 6, I'd certainly like it to be fewer. So, to the extent that my colleagues feel there's something on here that we could remove, that would be fantastic. 4 is really about innovation. So we were trying to capture those values that Palo Alto has as a city, right? Innovation and transparency. Follow through on commitments. Maybe that was a bit aspirational on my part to put that in there. It's so definitely open to suggestions about how we can, shorten this. Just want to be sure we're including things that hopefully would be non-controversial, that would be things that we could expect of ourselves. And then frankly, like of staff, hopefully to work into staff reports, right? Again, recognizing what Ms. Cotton Gaines said about the work that the city manager intends to do to develop a shared set of values for our staff. So I think the one thing that I haven't really talked about is, the now and in the future. I think that's the thing that really works in terms of the fiscal side and the climate side, which I think, frankly, we've struggled with a bit collectively, is how to figure out when something, an expense is here or an impact is in the future, how do we balance that? So we did think that was one potentially helpful way to bridge that gap.
Thank you. I wonder, Ms. Conagans, how many are in the staff's value statement?
Well, it's going to be worked on, so I don't have an exact number, but the amount that are in the existing budget, which is really the only place that our values as a city organization show up right now, which is part of the discussion, there are 5. So that's the quality, superior delivery of services, courtesy, providing service with respect and concern, efficiency, productive, effective use of resources, integrity, straightforward, honest, and fair relations, and innovation, which is excellence in creative thoughts and implementation. So those are the 5 with the subcategories. And that is on packet page 205.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm wondering, can we maybe, 5 seems like a good number. I like all of them. 6, I think, is the one that we might be able to, like the idea of open communication, but
we could merge 4 and 6, and the learning environment, I'd be interested in your feedback on that. It was a way to try to describe innovation. I don't know how innovative our council is. But I think the idea that we would be fostering a learning environment, I think is important. So we could say that we believe in, open communication with all members of our community and fostering a learning environment. And that might, we could put 4 and 6 together, and that's really centering the community first and learning as part of that.
what if we value innovation and open communication with value innovation? Yeah,
value innovation is good. I guess what I liked about learning environment, like I'm thinking about the DEI training that we'll all be taking. I feel like it's more active, to model what a learning environment means. It means we can make mistakes and learn from them. Valuing innovation to me sounds more like we're going to do pilot projects. So it's a little, it could go either way. Sorry, could you just repeat what you said? And I'm going to write that down.
Maybe we value innovation, and then I'm trying to figure out how that can incorporate open communication. We value innovation and.
Yeah. we did try to actually, you'll see, stay away from the word value and make it more action oriented, because we really want this to be about making decisions. So that will, yeah, that's just one thing to think about. Ms. Cotton Gaines, wordsmithing. Feel free to weigh in.
Thank
Collective
you.
effort.
I have none at this time. I'm just jotting notes. Keep going.
We are an innovative city.
Yeah, okay, so you want innovation as opposed to learning environment?
I think you made a good point on innovation. I guess when I kind of saw learning environment, I wonder, do people kind of see that as like, are you just kind of taking
We have a
shots in the
growth
dark?
mindset. We have a growth mindset.
I know, I love growth mindset. It's one of those things. I love the value. I'm just trying to figure out maybe how to wordsmith it a bit.
Okay, so we believe in open communication with all members of our community. We'll incorporate, innovative ideas or something like that. I mean, they're really two different concepts, but I think it's okay. I mean, the four, 1, 2, 3, and 5, which are sort of the four principles, are really about what we do. And is there something missing? Maybe that's another way to approach this. Is there anything my colleagues think is missing from 1, 2, 3, and 5 that is a enduring value in our community that we need to capture? Hearing silence.
I like
Silence
it.
is good. Okay, so now we just let's work a little bit on 4 and 6, which is really, how. And with your permission, can we? We're already being very informal, so okay.
Oh yeah.
Councilmember Tanaka, any thoughts on 4 and 6 and how we work together? You think it'd be helpful?
So first of all, thank you for your work on this. I'm just trying to think about how this all fits together. So I see the value statement for the annual city budget. And I think in general, I like what staff wrote, or I'm not sure who wrote this, but whoever wrote it, I think it generally makes sense. But I'm trying to understand for the council value statement, I mean, I guess first of all, where is this statement going to go? Like what, how does it work?
I think it will be, I hope that it will be a foundation that will mean that we don't have to have conversations about these 4 things at the priority setting. For me, that's been the struggle for these 4 years, is the priority setting has really been a lot more about values and less about the work we need to do in that year. So my devout hope is that we can all agree on a set of principles, and then we can talk about, in priority setting, the actual work for the year, not how much we all care about or the environment or how important it is to, be fiscally sustainable.
Because I think, first of all, we really can't bind future councils, right? Because whoever gets elected, they're going to encompass the values of the community. Right?
I definitely can't bind you to. That's true.
So, I'm just trying to understand how this works, because future councils are going to have their own agenda. Right? People are running to, accomplish some sort of mission, and I guess. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's really about time and focus for me. So I just feel like our time at the priority setting is often focused on things that we all agree on. And so we're not spending enough time on like the priorities. So to me, fiscal sustainability should just be a foundation, a floor, and we shouldn't be debating every year where it is on the importance level. It's a shared value. And so that's really comes straight from the priority setting.
That's true though, right? Is it true? I mean, I think that, I mean, I look at last night, right? I was the only one who voted against the BSR impingement, right? And so I think it's a
Sorry,
matter of.
which BSR?
It's
issue?
actually, the $1 million expense
For,
for item 7 last night. And so, you know, I think that it's a matter of degree, right? So I guess I think that I know what you're trying to do, and I generally like the idea. I just think it's hard because people are getting elected for a purpose, right? Each person ran for a reason. And it's hard for us to put guardrails around that, right? Some people, like for me, I'm definitely, you know, if you ask about fiscal sustainability, I'm really into that. And you guys know that. Probably more so than anyone else on council. Not to say that you guys aren't into it, but not into it like to the point that I am, right? And so, you know, so the values that I have don't necessarily align with some of the values you guys have.
Well, I think that's the point that Councilmember Cormack is making, is that we all agree, and like, right, we all agree that balancing revenues and expenses is important. We all agree that respecting the environment is important.
I don't think we
The
all
level
agree,
of
though.
degree, absolutely, but we all agree that they were important decisions. And what she's trying to, I think a really good point is, why waste time making that a priority when we already agree that it will be a priority, when we can focus on the more kind of what you're pointing out, right? The degree. And maybe that's a future council wants to say, this year, we really want to focus on the degree of the environment
Well,
beyond.
Well, like for me, I highly disagree with, you know, taking money or having a budget where it's not sustainable, right? Now, I was outvoted on this, right? 6-1, so I know where I stand. And so like, and that's number one here. But I mean, if that's
Okay,
really true, I don't think
okay.
we would have done that. right?
okay, so you don't agree with 1. What about 2?
I would like 1 to be true, but I'm just trying to, I mean, actually, I
Yeah.
like 1, but the issue that I have here is I'm trying to make this practical. How do we practically have something that's going to be useful
Yeah.
for future councils?
So
right?
let's spin out your issue with the BSR. I actually think the way that would be spun out is in the priority setting. You would say, I don't think our BSR is high enough, right? I don't think 18.5 is the right amount. I think we need to save more. I've heard you say this, right? Save more for, you know, future times when things are not going well. That would be a priority, right, for the year to figure out what's the right level of the BSR. Totally, that would be how I would be thinking about this.
Okay, I just don't understand the mechanics of how.
Well, we're
use this.
making them up. We're making them up because, you know, we want this body to function better.
Yeah. So maybe, I mean, if everyone gets elected, they all have the same values, great, okay, no problem. But I think the problem is that people get elected for different reasons and different motivations. And
right. And there four of you are going to continue. Half of the continuing council is sitting right here, and there'll be 3 new people. And I feel responsibility to try. If I fail, that's fine. It's happened before. Won't hurt my feelings. You know, to take what I hear as consistent in the community, not just the 7 of us, by the way, because, you know, these are things that we hear consistently, and provide that as a foundation or a floor or a basis for future councils to decide what to focus on. So, you know, if you don't want to, that's fine. If you don't think it'd be helpful, but I'm willing to try.
So first of all, I think we are aligned in terms of the goal. I like the idea of what we're trying to do.
So
what I
you-
don't see here is the mechanism to enable this, because whoever gets elected, whoever here is on council, everyone's going to have their own little thing going on. And I think really what we need more is some sort of because I don't think everyone's going to have the same value. I just don't think that's realistic. And I don't think, and I think the degrees of each one of these are going to be different. Some people are going to have different priorities for them. And I think in our priority setting, maybe what we need is more of a methodology of how to get through them. Because I'm not sure this is, I mean, it's nice platitudes. Okay, I can give you that, right? It's great. But I don't know if it's going to make a difference. I don't know if it's going to really help our priority setting meeting.
Well, let me
Yeah,
just
it would help if people refer to it, right? Because this is what I was trying to do this year. I'm like saying fiscal sustainability. I said it last year. I think I said it the year the COVID hit, right? I was like, oh, fiscal sustainability is a value. We don't need it on our list of priority settings. And that was sort of the genesis of this thinking. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to interject with a kind of a process point here. I mean, so this was a follow-up from a city council referral in February.
Yeah.
What was that referral?
Give me one moment.
It was a council direction for the Policy and Services Committee to draft and recommend a value
Well,
statement.
Well, it says, and I like that they have it here. So on page 204, it says set of values for the city. It didn't say set of values for the city council. We have here the set of values for the city council. Now, if we had a set of values for the cities, that makes sense, right? Because we are city council, we're supposed to represent the people that are here. And so we can come up with a set of values for the city. But for us to come up with a set of values for our city council and all future city councils, I think is crazy hard because people have different priorities.
Well, I think the logic applies on the other side. We're doing a value statement for the city. The next city council is going to.
It's going to change it.
Can
Yeah,
change it.
and it should
So
change
I
it.
think my point here is we have a referral from council to make this value statement. I think you're arguing against the merits of having a value statement, which
No.
I think are valid.
No, I think what it,
Council already.
No, I think what we-
Well, hold up. This is the only problem with doing the more informal discussion. So I think we should focus our conversation tonight on the value statement that we have in front of us. I think the debate has already been had by council on the merits of having a value statement, and that vote has already been taken.
okay, but
So maybe we can focus on the
Chair,
actual
please
values.
look at page 204 and read it, because it doesn't say set of values for the city council. It says set of values for the city.
Well, and that's why I asked Ms. Khan Gaines if she can refresh us on this.
Yes, so I found, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I found the minutes from your February 5th, 2022 council retreat. And it said the city council sent the following motion to the Policy and Services Committee. And that was refer to the Policy and Services Committee to recommend to the council a set of values that will continue over successive years as values for the city and the community.
City and the community. Okay, but
B,
that,
consider the following topics, but not limited to fiscal sustainability, social justice, healthy city, healthy community, and environmental sustainability.
so I think that makes more sense, right? Because we are city council, and so we're going to set the values for the city, and that can be updated by any future city council. But it doesn't say, at least maybe I'm mishearing or misreading, but it doesn't say set the values for the city council, which I think is a totally different ball of wax here.
Yes, please.
In the interim, the city manager is interested in developing values, not top down, and appropriately so, from us telling, our staff how to do things, because again, that is not our role. Our role is to set policy and choose the 4 council appointed officers to do that work, which is what we do. I think we should table whether it's city or city council for the time being. It's a little bit semantic and academic at this standpoint. I think that, it's been a long time since we had that meeting, and we could bring these value statements back forward and have a full discussion with all of the council and the city manager offering thoughts on whether or not this is helpful at this juncture. I'm not going to make any, assumptions about whether it is or isn't. So I don't think we're going to resolve whether it's for the city or for the city council. I certainly viewed it as a way for us to, table some of the high level discussions that didn't really result in, in concrete work for us to do. So shall we return to 4 and 6 and try and shove that together again, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I guess let me respond to that first, which is, I actually think that it's of course good to get some bottoms up for the staff to come up with their own set of values, because there's buy-in, there's merit in that. But I think inherently, there should be some guidance from council in terms of what the values are of the organization and of the city. And if those values change and, new people get elected, the values will get updated, because inherently staff and us, we serve at the behest of the people that live here. And so, it's not the other way around. The staff doesn't drive the ship. The residents, the people that live here drive the ship, right? So, I actually, when I read this, I thought it was more about us working with staff to come up with a set of values, as it's written here, because it doesn't say city council, and I didn't hear, in the minutes saying it's city council. With that said, I do think there is merit, as I said earlier, to make our priority setting meetings more efficient, because I've been part of all of them now, and I agree there could be a lot better. But I just don't know whether coming up with a set of values is the way to do it, or if there's a way more efficient to do it. So I just want to make sure that the work that you've done helps us in some way in the future.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. I think what Councilmember Tanaka is mentioning is sort of the core of why Mr. Shikata thought that it would be important to do an exercise working on updating the values that are existing right now for the city organization. Particularly, we looked back as far as we could, and we think they're from maybe the early 2000s. So they are just dated in the sense of being clear that the values that we're expressing to our staff for the day-to-day existence and the work that we're doing in service to the community are reflective of our current set of circumstances. And so I think that the experience that you're referencing with setting some of the values of the city council is definitely informing the work that staff is working on, as well as knowing that we have a lot of touch points and engagement to do in that work, both with our workforce and as appropriate conversations with the city council and the guidance you're setting right now. And through your budget process, all of those things help us in that effort as well. And I did want to introduce one of our new staff people who will be working on this behind me, Miss Lupita Alamos. She can wave. We assigned it to her. She's great. She's going to do it all. I know. I just turned around and noticed she was back there. I'll draw her to the table. But I'm hearing you, Councilmember Tanaka, and knowing the importance of doing this effort and making sure that multiple voices are heard so that we are properly serving the community.
All right.
I have a proposed 5 if we move 5 to 4.
Perfect, please.
We will communicate openly with all members of our community and welcome innovative solutions.
Love it.
We will communicate openly with all members of our community and welcome innovative solutions. And that would be the new number 5, and the current 5 would be 4. And then it's all we will. Looks like we planned it.
That's why we
All
gave
right,
the
and
task to you.
beg your
I
pardon?
said that's why we gave the task to you, a master wordsmither.
I don't know about that. And is the chair interested in having us make a motion to send this to council, and ask the city manager to, weigh in on aligning this with the work that, is that what you're looking for?
I think that makes
Great.
most sense.
So
as our
why
next
don't
step.
I move the amended draft value statement, and we'll just leave out city and council for now. How about draft value statement to be sent to council, and that the city manager provide information about how this would align with the work being done within the organization.
And I'll second that. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah. Ms. Cotton Gaines, do you think we should move right to adopting as you're listening to the discussion tonight?
I think it could go either way. I know that there was interest in the committee for this to be adopted before the next priority setting meeting, which is late
Soon.
January, early February. So
All right. I'm comfortable
to
with
you.
consider adopting. I'll just make sure openly and welcome innovative solutions. And staff heard that, we welcome the city manager co-creating the item and indicating how this would align with the work that he intends to do with the staff.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate us being able to get that down to 5. I think that's a good number. I really like these values, and I'm hopeful too that this can make our value setting, a policy setting, so it won't have to be a value setting, which would make us much more efficient. And I think this strikes the balance. I think Councilmember Tanaka, I think you brought up a reasonable point, and that debate can then be had at the council level, whether this is going to be a city council value statement or a city value statement, and having the city manager there as well to be able to talk about the value statement that he is working on as well for staff, will allow us to be able to vet this in a more kind of holistic way. So Councilmember Tanaka, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah. I actually liked, I don't know who actually wrote the one for the city budget. Councilmember Cormack did? Okay, so you wrote.
No, he's saying about the budget. No, I don't recall when this was brought forward, even if Director Nozay remembered.
Yes, when we were looking back, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. When we were looking back, these have been in the budget since the early 2000s. So you can assume some effort was done around then, likely led by the city manager at that time, but we don't have the actual information on exactly who did it.
I actually like it a lot, to be honest. I think even though it may be old, I think it's held to the test of time in general. I do wonder if this, I like actually how you guys are making this a value statement versus a city council value statement. I actually think that's better. But I just wonder if the maker and seconder can look at what's in the current value statement. And, to be honest, if we could just have a unified value statement across the whole city, I think that's better versus one for this organization versus a different one for another organization. So I just wanted to, given the shift to, just a value statement in general versus one for city council, what are the maker and seconders thoughts of trying to fold in some of the ones from the original city budget one?
So when I looked at those were a lot more about how to do work and less about the kind of work that we will do. So, doing quality work with courtesy, efficiently, those are, to me, sort of expectations for how people perform their work and not enduring values that will guide how we make decisions. So I appreciate them in context. I do find them surprising in the budget. They seem more like a customer service oriented type of conversation. And I think they're really about operations and less about policy. So that was my thinking when I looked at them.
Actually, I'm just curious from the chair's perspective. What do you think?
I think I concur with Councilmember Cormack on her assessment of it, and I'm happy with the value statement that's in the motion.
Okay. I don't necessarily have an issue with the ones in there. I just think that the ones in the city budget actually are pretty good. And I'm just looking at both of them side by side here and trying to think of if there's things that we could fold in, because I in general, I've been part of a lot of organizations, big and small, and values alignments is actually really hard, and you generally want to have the same value statement throughout the organization. And so if you have a value statement here and it doesn't align with the one that's here in the city budget, I just wonder how that works, right? Shouldn't it just be one value statement versus like multiple? So maybe we can, I actually think there should be a unified value statement. And maybe what we should do is have a value statement that's kind of meld into to the one that staff is coming with. Because staff is an extension of what we're doing. And I think that might be more powerful, more effective, actually. So I don't know if the maker seconder has thoughts about that.
Or are you making
I'm asking a question. So I think Councilman Cormack has a good point that this is a little bit more about the how, but I inherently believe that we are a customer service organization. The city is, right? We're providing services to people that are here. And I see that that's encompassed in the value statement on point 2. And I think that's actually in point 1 as well. And that's good to encompass. And I'm just wondering if there's a way, in fact, most organizations I've been to, there's usually one kind of unified value statement, not like two sets of different ones. And I just wonder, would it make more sense for us to kind of have more of a unified one versus a this kind of separate one that we're proposing right now?
But I think Councilmember Cormack I think she already described the kind of role the council plays and the role that staff plays, and that is the prerogative of staff and the city manager. And I, as well as seems Councilmember Cormack, don't appear comfortable to do that tonight.
Okay.
And again, I think if you want to make that argument at the full council meeting, that's fine. But I think where we're at tonight, I think it appears we're ready for a vote.
Okay, that's fine. Let's vote.
Okay, thank you. Can the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Cormack,
Yes.
Chair Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka.
No.
The motion carries 2-1.
Great, thank you, everyone. And that is the end of our meeting. So we will adjourn at 9:19. Thank you. Good night.
And Councilmember Stone, or Chair Stone, sorry, the November meeting, I'll want to discuss that date with you. It's on election night. So just a heads up. It is on election night. And so typically that isn't the day that we keep meetings held, but we have a lot of business to take care of. So I'll discuss that with you offline. Yeah, thank you.